So I'm Tom Fishburne. I draw a cartoon called Brand Camp. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience as both a cartoonist and also as someone who works in innovation. So to kick it off, I've like a lot of you guys who do cartooning, I've always wanted to do cartooning. My childhood hero was the Calvin and Hobbes cartoonist, Bill Watterson. He quit suddenly after just doing it for 10 years. And it just totally threw me for a loop. Why would Gary Larson, after Far Side, quit cartooning and do that? After supposedly the example of success. And the answer a little bit is what cartooning, newspaper cartooning was at the time. And in fact, that time, 1995, was actually somewhat the good old days of newspaper cartooning by comparison of what it is today. But if you think about the typical traditional cartooning route in the newspapers, have one page that has to basically appeal to everyone. It's shrinking in space. Most of the cartoons that are in that page are commodities that have been around for 30, 40 years, rarely even drawn by the original cartoonist who came up with the material on the page. And the few opportunities you have to actually break in there are incredibly few and far between. So, Bill Watterson, Gary Larson are the successful ones. There are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of others who bang their head against that wall and haven't even been able to get to the first step. So I found that kind of interesting, and then I went off to take a career in business, a blood-sucking corporate parasite of another variety, and have worked in innovation in some way, shape, or form for the last 15 years, both web-based as well as consumer products. I've worked in big companies, I've worked in small companies, and along the way I started a cartoon strip kind of making fun of all of it. And I found that innovation, much like that field of cartooning, was a similar type of situation where you're coming up with ideas that are remarkable, and then you're surrounded by others in some way, shape, or form that degrade those ideas over time. A remarkable idea can start out really something special, and over time it slowly becomes watered down so that what actually launches is a pale shadow of the original idea, whether that's because of your organization or the sheer fact of trying to get it out into the marketplace. And so I realized that actually Dagwood Bumstead isn't really that different from Betty Crocker. It's the same dilemma. If you think about the grocery stores, these big shelves, most of the brands have been there since the 50s, they're all commodities, and it's hard to break into those segments either. And you can think about any form of innovation being the status quo that's quite impenetrable, and finding some way to come up with the innovations that actually can make it through and sit on the shelves. So I started to play around with this idea a lot, and I realized that there were lots of similarities. I started this cartoon about 10 years ago, initially emailing it out to a few friends and colleagues of mine, where I worked at General Mills, a big American food company. It got forwarded around. I eventually started a blog to go along with it, started with Twitter and all that kind of stuff, and it now reaches about 50,000 people a week, targeted toward the improbable audience of brand managers. And why that's interesting is that, while you could think of this as the bad days for cartooning, because you look at all the cartoonists who are getting kicked out of jobs being editorial cartoonists for all the national papers, it's the good old days, and that I simply wouldn't have been able to start a cartoon strip targeted to brand managers 20 years ago because there would have been no medium to actually reach this audience.